Welcome to Malpractice Podcast.
Hello. Are you ready to get started?
You scared me. I always count to 3, and you did it on a 2, so you scared me.
I just like to keep you on your toes.
Yeah, you do. You do.
I do. I'm Sydney.
And I'm Jess.
And this is Malpractice.
Yeah, and we're on our toes.
And we're on our toes.
And it's Malpractice in the morning.
So you know it's going to be a good one.
You know it's going to be good.
The hits always happen first thing in the morning.
And they keep on coming. What are you drinking this morning?
Coffee, of course. The strongest. Look, you can't really see it. It's the color of mud because I was like,
nope.
Only a little creamer this morning. Jack me up.
Oh, jack her up. I'm drinking a Coke Zero.
For breakfast?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, well out.
Well, yeah, I am. That's so. I didn't have time to make coffee, and I was like, well, I gotta have something, a little kick in my life.
You need caffeine, yeah.
You do need it. Actually, I don't know if we've told our listeners yet, but I'm pregnant.
Oh, yeah. Are we allowed to tell people that?
Yeah, I told the whole world. Yeah. I'm pregnant.
Yeah.
And this is, I learned yesterday, so I had an appointment yesterday. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, I have headaches in the morning, like every day. Like, I hate myself. Like, what do I do? Because she's like, do you have consistent issues, like headaches? And I was like, bitch, yes. I just thought that was something that happened. She's like, have a little caffeine.
Oh.
And I was like, don't you bitches not like us to have a lot of caffeine?
I thought we weren't supposed to.
And I was listening, and now I regret listening. She was like, no, just have a little caffeine. Just have a little.
You were probably having caffeine withdrawals.
But for 17 weeks?
Oh, that's a long time. I don't know.
I know. I was like, now listen. Now, ma'am, now listen now. I know things about caffeine because I drink too much of it. So I know it really only takes like 72 hours for caffeine to leave your system.
Right.
So you should really only have
withdrawals
for like maybe a week. And then your body should assimilate to like new life.
I would think so.
But I've still been drinking caffeine.
Yeah.
And eating chocolate, which also has caffeine in it.
But not to the same extent
as monster.
Yeah, of course not. First of all, correct me if I'm wrong, all of the good things are the things that you can't eat when you're pregnant.
Yeah, sushi.
Soft cheeses.
I want sushi so bad.
Soft cheese would be my downfall.
You can have it if it's pasteurized.
Yeah, but that good shit is unpasteurized.
Yeah, I know how you feel about it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's very weird. No.
Any other weird cravings?
Well, I've gone through like waves. Mm-hmm. Cheese for me is one.
Cheese is my craving in just regular life.
Well, we don't have it, right? Because Michelle's lactose intolerant. But right now we have, I'm not kidding you, 4 stacks of sliced cheese.
Sure.
Like 4 packages.
Yeah.
In the fridge because I just like have to have it. And we have individual like Baby Bell.
Oh,
and I have string
those.
cheese and stick cheese.
Sure.
All of those types of cheese currently in my lactose intolerant house.
Yeah. You're describing my grocery list.
Life. Yeah.
What's the fruit size now that we're up to?
Pomegranate.
Pomegranate?
Bitch, it's big.
Huge.
Yeah. Yeah. We went from like pear to pomegranate. I was like, wait.
If you have no idea what we're talking about, there's an app you can use to tell what size fruit your baby is approximately the size of.
And this one app, I have like 3 apps, and one of them does like other things. Like you can swipe and it'll be like vegetable, like 90s things. It's like a Furby is one of them or something like that. I was like, that's funny.
So funny.
Yeah, I like that.
That is funny.
Yeah.
Invented by a millennial for sure.
Yeah, I was like, this is cute.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're pomegranate.
Precious.
Or a large onion.
I like a pomegranate better.
Me too. I love pomegranates.
Same.
In general. I have like 4 in the fridge right now.
Yeah, I love pomegranate. And a large onion is boring. It's like...
Yeah. The thing about a pomegranate is it's so much work.
Oh, it's so much work.
To eat.
I mean, like...
Damn!
It's worth it, but just barely.
It is like a marathon. Fruit.
A pomegranate is like a treat for me to myself because I will not normally take the time to do a pomegranate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Y'all, Also, Sydney was on vacation, and I want to shout you out, Sydney, because she was in the fucking beautiful Cayman Islands and still managed to edit and put out the episode last week. So that was incredible.
Thank you. That's nice.
Because I wouldn't have.
I went through a period where I was like, do I, don't I, do I, don't I? And then I decided to just push through.
Good job.
The Cayman Islands are beautiful. If you get a chance to visit them, highly recommend. We ate really good food. While we were there, my mom made a reservation under Dr. Sproul Eldridge so they would give us a good table.
Oh, and did they?
They did. And then the guy was like, oh, what kind of doctor are you? Because I have a skin thing. And I was like, no.
Not that kind of doctor.
Don't show me your skin thing. Not that kind of doctor.
You can show it to me. I don't know shit.
I was like, I'll look at it, but I can't tell you what it is. And I am about to eat dinner.
Yeah, that's kind of gross, sir.
It's kind of gross. Yeah. So know that if you get a PhD, people will try to show you their skin thing.
Yeah.
But they give you a good table.
Yeah, Sydney looked like she was on a fucking postcard the whole time. She'd like post a picture and I was like...
It was so beautiful. The blue water.
It looked fake.
Yeah, it really did. Somebody was like, what's that filter? And I was like, it's just...
life here.
It's just that island life.
Yeah.
So that was my graduation trip. Thank you. Shout out to my parents for taking me. It was really fun.
Yeah, and they got a great house. They like rented that.
Yeah.
That's so fun.
Yeah, it was a cool Airbnb. We had a really good time.
What else did you do? Did you just lounge and love your life?
I swam with sea turtles. Yeah.
No,
cool.
Usually when you say I swam, I was like, oh my god, fucking sharks. Usually it'll be a shark situation with your ass.
I love a shark.
This time, sea turtles.
A sea turtle.
How
I got
cute.
to see 3 of them.
How
really cool.
did you do that? Just swimming around or on an like
We
excursion?
just read this local guide thing that was like, hey, if you want to go see, like, they were wild sea turtles.
Oh my god.
You just get to swim up to them and they're just chilling. And they know people swim there, like all the locals swim there, so they don't care. The turtles don't care.
Yeah.
It was really cool. And I feel conflicted about some of those excursions where it's like swim with the dolphin, because I'm like, dolphins are pretty smart. Should they be in captivity? I don't know.
Oh yeah. No, don't get me on a blackfish
Tangent.
rant because I will go off.
Yeah, blackfish ruined me for all orca experiences.
Ruined
But
me.
this was a wild sea turtle in the ocean.
That is so cool.
Yeah, it was very cool.
The other thing I did this weekend on last Friday was get my boosty.
Yep.
My COVID booster.
If you haven't gotten boosted, go get boosted.
Get boosted. So when I was there, you have to wait for 15 minutes. And because I always faint, I always wait the 15 minutes.
Yeah.
I was thinking about like vaccines and where they come from. Like I always do when I get a shot.
Sure.
Just like casual shit at Walgreens. Like I wonder why, how, what. And I was thinking about how we haven't covered the 1918 influenza pandemic yet.
Right.
So in honor of flu, RSV, and COVID season, and getting as many vaccines as you can to protect yourself and your loved ones against those, and just in honor of vaccines and science everywhere, I thought we could cover that this episode. And Sydney was like, yes, so that's what we're doing.
Yeah. This is like the OG pandemic. You probably know it as the Spanish flu. We're going to talk about that name. It's questionable.
Mm-hmm.
This is a great idea for an episode because we love a medical history piece. Props to Jess. She did the legwork on this because, as we've said, I was gallivanting.
A bitch was gallivanting and I was
Correct.
jelly.
Yeah.
And that's exactly right. Like the 1918-1920 influenza pandemic, it's known to many as the Spanish flu or the Great Influenza Epidemic. It was a massive pandemic caused by the H1N1 influenza flu virus. That should sound familiar to you.
Mm-hmm.
H1N1 is the designated subtype. The type was A.
Mm-hmm.
The earliest documented case occurred in March in 1918 in Kansas, United States, so it should be called the Kansas flu. Anyway.
Totally.
And other cases started popping up shortly afterwards in France, Germany, the UK, in April. So 2 years later, almost a third of the global population, roughly 500 million people, have been infected in a total of 4 different waves. It's estimated, conservatively, that 20 to 50 million people died, making this one of the most deadly pandemics in recent history, following the Black Death that we've covered before.
Right. I saw you mentioned that the 20 to 50 million is like a conservative estimate. I saw in a couple of different sources that the death count may have actually been up to 100 million.
I saw that too, because people would develop like other things like pneumonia.
Yes.
And then they would die.
And then they might die of a secondary infection or something like that.
Right. But it was actually this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Perhaps until recently, Spanish flu has been what some people call a forgotten pandemic. But it was a huge global calamity. In terms of the number of deaths, far greater than the casualties of the First World War.
The other thing is, because this happened as World War I was kind of winding down, people were all over the world trying to hide how badly their soldiers specifically were being infected.
Mm-hmm.
So the real numbers are kind of difficult to estimate because of how much people were trying to hide it, and also because of, like we said, the secondary infection situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Apparently, though, more people died during this pandemic than in all of World War I put together. And according to one article from Stanford University, more people died of influenza in a single year than in 4 years of the Black Death bubonic plague from 1347 to 1351, which is like peak Black Plague territory. More people died of this influenza in a single year than during that entire 4-year period.
Mm-hmm. This is bad.
Yeah. Anytime something claims more lives than the, quote, Black Death, you know that shit is real.
Very real. Very scary.
This virus killed more people in the first 25 weeks than HIV/AIDS has killed in 25 years. Horrendous. I mean, those mortality statistics are staggering.
Really, I mean, it was the OG pandemic. First time people did like quarantines.
They shut things down.
Right. So in the fall of 1918, with World War I winding down and peace kind of finally on the horizon, people were starting to get optimistic, despite the fact that there were still thousands of people in the trenches, which literally seems like hell on earth.
Oh, a trench? Not even a good word.
trench?
Doesn't even sound good.
Have you ever heard of trench foot?
Yep.
Okay.
We should cover that. It's disgusting.
For anyone who doesn't know, trench foot is like soldiers who were in the trenches, their boots would stay wet because of how gross the trenches were, and their feet would basically rot off.
Yeah.
It's horrifying.
Rotting feet.
Ugh. Also, people are stacked on top of each other in the trenches. Like, they're really close quarters.
Oh, yeah.
So when there's something like a flu going around, everybody gets it.
Yeah. Everybody's sick.
Right. So basically, everybody's starting to look optimistic despite the war still going on, but it's starting to wind down. Then all of a sudden, in dispersed pockets across the globe, this illness starts popping up. When it first started, people thought it was pretty benign, like they kind of compared it to the common cold.
Mm-hmm.
But it would eventually go on to infect over 1/3 of the world's population, which is crazy.
So not benign.
Right.
So you were wrong, everyone.
Right. So what I read is that the first wave was fairly benign, and then something happened between the first and second that made it like a whole different...
Yeah. What is it called that it does?
Mutated.
Mutates.
Right.
Yeah.
At first, though the illness was widespread, most of the deaths were in elderly people and infants. This strain having next to no mnemonic effect on healthy men and women between the ages of 20 and 40. As spring merged into summer, new infections plateaued and dropped off, causing many to believe the worst was over.
So according to a few different publications that I found, it had an acute illness rate, so something that makes you very sick early on, of between 25 to 30% across all age groups, and a mortality rate that was higher than 2.5%.
Yeah.
Which means that 2.5% of the, what did we say, 500 million people who got it died from this
Yeah.
flu.
Yep.
Compare that also to previous influenza epidemics, which the mortality rate was less than 0.1%.
Yeah, so this is a serious situation.
Right, killing tons of people.
Mm-hmm.
up to 5% of the entire world's population would eventually die from this flu variant within a period of a little over a year. So you have to think about 5% of the population just dying is crazy.
Yeah.
And it changes, not to sound dramatic, but it changes the trajectory of the human existence.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is crazy.
So while there's no universal consensus about where it originated in the U.S. Anyway,
Yeah.
It's the Kansas flu.
I think people are pretty agreed on that point at this point.
It's just like, it's still known as the Spanish flu, and it's wrong.
Right.
Newspapers during this time and like news people were desperate for something to report because all they had been reporting about was the war, and the war is winding down. So they're like, got to report something. But they're also in this time of censorship.
Right.
So information started rolling out. They inaccurately named the origination of this illness to Spain, which is inaccurate, but that's where you've heard the name Spanish flu. The Times of London titled the document, quote, Spanish epidemic, and that name took off around the world. While the illness did not originate in Spain, the reporting of the illness did, because of the wartime censorship, stopped other countries from reporting about it, but Spain was neutral. So they were able to talk about their own illnesses, and they were like, oh my God, people are sick. Like, this is crazy. And they were talking about it.
Right. And they were the only ones talking about it. Exactly.
And nobody else talking about it, even though they have lots of sick people.
Right.
And Kansas is like, do not say our name. We did not do this. But they did it.
Kansas's name out of your mouth.
Yeah. And the U.S. is like, you shut up. We didn't originate anything.
Right.
But Spain was like, oh, we're just a neutral country living our best life. Like, here's some facts about what's going on. And everyone's like, Spanish flu.
It's Spain. Yeah.
In order to maintain high morale as the war effort swung in favour of the Allied powers, European governments, then having a stranglehold over the media, heavily understated the severity of the disease. Meanwhile, news reports began surfacing from the other European powers, claiming that infection rates in Britain, France and Germany remained minimal, while neutral Spain was particularly hard hit.
Yeah, so that plus King Alfonso was ill during this time. So it made it look to other countries like, bam, this is where it started.
Right.
Spain's reporting about it. Their king is sick. It's them.
Yeah.
In fact, reporting was so censored during that time that neighboring countries were dealing with the illness in droves, but Spain didn't even know.
Right.
Spain was like, who else is sick? And everyone's like,
hands down.
never heard of
Yeah.
her. Not me.
Couldn't be me. So then in October of 1918, a Spanish official wrote something called the Madrid Letter to the Journal of the American Medical Association saying, quote, we were surprised to learn that the disease was making ravages in other countries and that people there were calling it the Spanish gripe, and wherefore Spanish, which like...
And wherefore Spanish?
Wherefore, indeed.
I love that exclamation there.
The epidemic... No, same.
Sorry. I had to say it too. I wanted to say it so bad.
I mean, same. Like, wherefore?
Wherefore?
The epidemic was not born in Spain. This is back to the quote. The epidemic was not born in Spain, and this should be recorded as a historic vindication. They're like, not me, bitch.
Yeah, they were like, first of all, shut your mouth, retract.
Retract it. And people were like, no.
Yeah, they were like, shut up. We've already pointed at you. It's done now.
Right. It's over. History forever says this is Spain's fault.
Literally. That's stupid, but
yeah.
It's true.
But before this letter could be published, the Serbian newspaper said, quote, various countries have been assigning the origin of this imposing guest to each other for quite some time. And at one point, they agreed to assign its origin to the kind and neutral Spain. So basically, for not being a part of the war, Spain gets blamed.
That is so fucked.
Yeah.
I don't like that.
No, not a fan.
Spain was like, leave me out of this war.
Right.
Let's just go about our business. Oh my God, our king is sick. We have to tell people. People are sick. We'll tell people because we just care.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, you.
Right.
And they're like, me?
They got blamed for basically honestly reporting what was happening.
Yeah.
It's wild. Originally, the French were calling it the American flu, but then
Correct name.
France and the U.S. were allies, and they were like, we ain't trying to piss off America, so they were basically down to call it the Spanish flu.
They were like, the American flu, and America looked at them and they were like, Spanish, I mean, obviously.
Yeah. They're like, American flu, and then America's like, what'd you say? And they're like, Spain. I said Spain.
Spain did it.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm saying.
Did I say America? That's not Spain for sure.
Sorry, I was coughing because I have the Spanish flu.
Spain. Right. British soldiers called it the Flanders flu, which...
Because they wanted something difficult to say. Or what?
Right. German soldiers used Flandern fever, which is the Flemish fever, because there had been a battlefield in Belgium where lots of soldiers on both sides got sick. So they said it was from Belgium.
Everyone's pointing fingers.
Right. In Senegal, they called it the Brazilian flu. In Brazil, they called it the German flu. In Spain, they called it the French flu.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, have you seen that meme of Spider-Man pointing at the two other Spider-Mans?
Yes, that's it. So, and The Office, too, when they're like this.
Yes. Oh, the standoff?
Scene?
Yeah.
Yeah, the standoff.
Right. That's what's happening with everybody. Like, it's not our fault. Blame somebody else.
Yeah, and Spain probably heard the French, and Spain was like, fuck you guys, so we're just going to start calling it the French flu.
Yeah.
Mind your business.
Hey, I thought you were on our side.
Yeah.
This is from America. Nobody knew where Kansas was. That's the problem.
Well, yeah. Yep. Feels right.
So, sorry, Kansas. If we have listeners in Kansas, please don't at us.
Yeah, sorry, Kansas.
It eventually became so popular that there was a children's rhyme. And so while kids were like jumping rope, they would say,
I had a little bird, his name was Enza. I opened the window and influenza.
which sounds kind of stupid. But the whole point is it's super transmissible. So, like, keep your windows closed, stay inside, because if you open the window, it's coming in.
Yeah. Well, you're not wrong.
Right.
The case of Albert Gitchell, that's right?
Mm-hmm.
An Army cook at Camp Funston in Kansas, was the first recording of a case of the flu in the U.S. and the world. The disease had already been observed 200 miles away in Haskell County, Kansas, as early as January 1918, prompting a local doctor, Loring Minor, to warn the editors of the U.S. Public Health Service's academic journal Public Health Reports. Within days of the March case at Camp Funston, 522 men at the camp had been reported sick.
Yeah, that's quick.
By March 11th of 1918, the virus had reached Queens, New York. So, boom, it's spreading.
Right.
Failure to take preventative measures in March and April was later criticized. But I get it. Yeah, we can criticize, but, like, there's also a war. Like, I don't think people were really worried about it, like what they thought was a cold at the time.
Right. And also, President Wilson had recently given his like 14 points address or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And he was like, things are looking up. We're successful. All is good.
Nothing happened in Kansas.
Right. Kansas is chill.
Don't look at Kansas. Yeah.
He literally just didn't publicly acknowledge that it was happening. So that's chill.
Yeah, that's wrong.
Also, apparently Camp Funston's, they used to say, put the fun in Funston.
Oh, it was a fun place.
It's a military camp, so that has to be sarcastic, I think.
Yeah. Okay. I'm like, oh, fun. Where are we going?
Yeah. And this doctor, I just want to say one more thing about this. This doctor, Loring Minor, is actually kind of an unsung hero.
Like a whistleblower.
Yes. If he hadn't started talking about it, we probably would never have known historically where it originated. Also, because of the fact that it happened at a military camp, and these soldiers are getting shipped all over the place, it starts to spread pretty quickly. So because of the fact that we're in the middle of a world war, soldiers are being transferred everywhere, it goes global almost instantly.
To that point, the sickness spread through the ranks of forces and then transferred is not what I meant to say, transferred, to the Allied forces of France, Great Britain, and Italy through, like, mingling of soldiers.
Right.
When Germany released Russian prisoners of war, they brought the disease back home. And then it spread to North Africa, India, Japan, all of that in May. The first wave lasted from the first quarter of 1918 and was actually considered mild, as we've said.
Yeah.
People were like, I have a cold. It's fine.
Exactly.
In the U.S., about 75,000 flu-related deaths were reported, which is, I guess, a normal amount.
Yeah.
In Spain, there were less than 1,000 people that died during that time, and there was no public quarantines because it didn't originate in Spain. Leave Spain alone. That's my last. That's my last hurrah for Spain for the day.
Right. The point of all of that is that the first wave was not that bad comparatively. We're going to see that it happens over the course of 4 waves, and it's going to get worse. The first wave mostly affected military bases and the surrounding towns, so comparatively it wasn't that bad, except that those military bases have people who are then being spread everywhere.
Yeah.
Right.
When the H1N1 influenza virus first struck, the US had been fighting in the European theatre of the First World War for more than a year. Tens of thousands of men regularly travelled across the Atlantic to the front, and production lines boomed in efforts to produce war material and combat gear. It was during this mass population movement that the first reports of illness began to appear. Meanwhile, American GIs continued to pour into Europe, then back and forth from the front to medical leave, spreading the virus ever more.
Now, the second wave, that's something different.
Yeah.
This wave was brought by ships from Brest and spread to Boston, Freetown, Sierra Leone, and others. From the Boston Navy Yard in Camp Davis, about 30 miles west of Boston, other U.S. military sites were affected, including troops that were being sent to Europe. And this is the second wave. So this is like a mutated version of the first flu that was mild.
Right. So what I heard is that basically started in Kansas, went to Europe, came back to the U.S., went back to Europe.
Yeah, mutated.
And it's mutating the whole way and getting basically more and more virulent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In July of 1918, the Ottoman Empire got cases in soldiers from Freetown. The pandemic spread through West Africa along the coast, rivers, and colonial railways. New York City saw its first fatality from the flu on September 15th. And there was a large parade in Philly on the 28th of September that resulted in 12,000 deaths after this. It's like a super spreader event.
Right.
Everyone was like, yay, the war's ending. And then everyone was like, I'm ill. What's going on?
Yeah.
The illness hit South Africa from ships bringing back members of the South African Native Labor Corps. From Europe, the second wave went through Russia and spread through the railway. And then it went into China and Japan. So it was just like, boom, everywhere.
Everywhere, right. And the second wave, like we said, was much more deadly than the first. The first was sort of a typical flu virus. Those who were at risk were typically the immunocompromised, the ill, the elderly, and the very young, like the typical kind of target populations.
Who we would think, yeah.
Right. Those that typically get really, really sick from a flu virus. Healthy younger people were pretty much recovering from the first wave. And then in October of 1918, they saw the highest fatality rate of the entire pandemic. 200,000 people died in that month alone.
Damn.
In the U.S., about 292,000 deaths were reported in just September through December. India reported an estimated 12.5 to 20 million deaths in the last quarter of 2018.
I think it's so crazy how wide the range is of deaths, too, right? It's like, we're not sure, but it's
same.
A shit ton.
Right. It could be anywhere from 20 million on the lowest end to 100 million. It's like, that's a factor of 5 difference. Yeah. We should know that number, I think.
We should know more, yeah.
Right.
So the second wave, super terrible.
Right.
Well, at the time in the 1920s, they estimated that maybe 20 million had died. By the late 20th century, that figure had been up to 25 million. In the 21st century, with scientists and historians now getting together to work much more closely, that figure has now been upped to 50 to 100 million people killed.
The third wave hit Australia for the first time, and it ended up killing between 12,000 to 20,000 people after the quarantine was lifted. In Australia, the death rate ended up being fairly low, but about 40% of the total population was infected, which is crazy.
God damn, that's crazy.
Unfortunately, the Aboriginal communities in Australia saw a death rate of up to 50% in some areas.
And I saw that with like relation to healthcare.
Access to healthcare.
Or the lack thereof. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Beep boop bop. Oh yeah. So after there's reports of this flu in Australia, it spreads again through Europe and the US as part of the third wave. It lingered through the spring until June of 1919. The third wave especially hit these areas really hard. Spain, Serbia, Mexico, Great Britain, resulting in hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of deaths. It was less severe than the second wave, but still much more deadly than the initial first wave.
So now we have wave 4, and you're like, when will the wave stop? It's this one. This is the last wave.
After this one, yeah.
Yeah. And that was in 1920. There were fears of the flu reappearing in the fall as people had realized disease can do more damage in the colder months. Hello, we realized that too.
Right.
For like the year of our Lord COVID, which is now going on 3 years. In September, the U.S. Surgeon General Rupert Blue said a return to the flu would probably, would quote, probably, but by no means certainly occur. He's like not my favorite person, just FYI.
No.
France and Britain prepared for the same situation, except for the certainly part. They were like, anyway, this is going to happen. Y'all are stop doing this.
Yeah.
In the U.S., there were isolated cases of the flu in spring and summer as well. Chicago was like really hit super hard. The Public Health Service announced it would take steps to localize the epidemic, but the disease was already in Kansas City. Kansas. Again, look at you. And it spread from there. Chicago's growth in cases was insane, but people weren't dying at the same rates as they had before. They were just, everyone was sick. Like, everyone knew someone or was sick. That was it.
Yeah.
In 1 week, the new cases surpassed the peak during the wave in 1919. So it was like everyone was infected. New York was seeing a similar case increase. They had pandemic restrictions in some areas, like what we saw, like closing schools, theaters, staggering business hours so that you couldn't have like people congregating, except things like we saw. And that sounds familiar to us.
Yeah.
I loved it when actually they would let like the older people come in the mornings.
I feel like they should always do that.
I do too.
Yeah.
Show me your ID, and if you're under 50, get out of here.
GTFO.
Well, with everything was spreading, right, then we see Surgeon General Blue come back, and I can't stand him. And he warns the public not to get panicky over the flu, which is a stupid thing to say.
Yeah.
Everyone
As a Surgeon General.
Everyone relax. Shut up. Be quiet.
No.
Then the Senate is sensing a turn in the tide, and the flu also began to affect their own families. So they're like, okay, well, we need to do something. Hadn't done anything so far.
Well, now it's serious.
And on the 27th of January, they passed an appropriations bill that was for $500,000 for the study of influenza. You would think after the, 2-3 waves, they figured out, but like, okay. Mm-hmm. The bill was introduced in July of 1919 by Senator Warren G. Harding. After the third wave had subsided, the bill had been intended to be about $5 million, and they whittled it down to $500,000.
Cool.
And ultimately, a letter from Carter Glass, who was the Secretary of Treasury, regarding the outbreaks occurring in large cities and the threat they posed to the rest of the country, persuaded many senators to vote for the package, which it's crazy to me that you needed the Secretary of the Treasury to be like, this is impacting people beyond, like, them dying, like, the economy.
Right.
Hello. For people to be like, oh, I think, we should do this.
It's a little bit ridiculous that it took all of that to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like after COVID, we all kind of want to know what it looked like, what to look out for. So what did this illness look like?
Yeah.
At the start, the majority of people infected had typical symptoms like sore throat, headache, fever. But during the second wave, the disease was more complicated, and it often occurred with bacterial pneumonia, which would often become the ultimate cause of death for people, basically a secondary infection.
Right. And that's what we were talking about when people couldn't really verify why people, like, cause of death, because they were so sick.
Exactly. I saw one doctor describe it as the nastiest, most untreatable case of pneumonia he ever saw. One observer wrote, one of the most striking complications was hemorrhage from mucous membranes, especially from the nose, stomach, and intestines. Bleeding from the ears and petechial hemorrhages of the skin also occurred, so it's not good.
That's gross.
The symptoms are very graphic and very, very striking. So, it's said that some people drowned in their own phlegm. So if it was hitting or affecting the lungs, people were spurting blood from their ears and their noses. Descriptions of people turning blue or purple. So, it was really, really severe, and people just dropping down in the streets.
There was also this thing called heliotrope cyanosis, which is 2 dark red spots that are like mahogany colored over the cheekbones, which would spread to turn the entire face blue. The extremities would get black.
You would look like you had frostbite, is what they would look like.
Frostbite on your fingers. Exactly. Death would typically follow that within hours or days. Other signs would be mouth and nosebleeds. Miscarriages were common for pregnant women. People smelled weird. Their teeth and hair were falling out. They were delirious, dizzy. They had insomnia, loss of hearing and smell, and blurred vision. One of the craziest things about this particular flu is how deadly it was for people between the ages of 15 and 34. Because, again...
You're supposed to be fine.
Right. Those are young, healthy people who are typically going to survive a case of the flu.
Right.
Like, have you ever had the flu?
Mm-hmm.
It will absolutely knock you on your ass, but if you're...
The flu shot knocks me on my ass. So the flu...
Right. It's hard on your body for sure, but if you're in your 30s, you're typically fine.
You're supposed to be fine at least.
Yes.
I feel like that's the thing. People are like, oh, I got it, but I'm fine. And then they would take a dive.
Exactly. Recovery was not really happening for people in this age range because with most flu viruses, those at risk are really young or really old or immunocompromised. Something is wrong with them.
Mm-hmm.
But with this variant, it was so bad that the pandemic actually lowered the average life expectancy in the United States by more than 12 years. In 1920, around 92% of the total deaths occurred in people under the age of 65, which is like unheard of for a flu pandemic.
Yeah.
Because partially there had been another less severe pandemic of what people called the Russian flu in 1890, which may have given the older population some partial immunity, but the younger people did not have that partial immunity.
Didn't have exposure. Got it.
And we're going to talk, so this is the end of part 1. We're going to talk in part 2 about why it was killing people in this age range. But I heard stories where, like a young woman's bridge club of 4 women who met up regularly, spread the flu to each other. And within 2 days, all 4 of these like young women had died.
Oh my God.
People in age ranges that had not in the past been affected as severely were being affected. And it's crazy.
It is crazy.
And we got to talk about it.
Yeah, we're going to get into some other gross things in the next episode as well about this particular flu.
Yeah. In the next episode, we're going to talk about some gross things and some terrible side effects, but we're also going to talk about some of the research breakthroughs and some stories of heroes that were in the pandemic.
If you have a topic you want us to cover, send us a DM, Malpractice Podcast on Instagram, or you can send us an email, malpracticepodcast@gmail.com.
If you get a chance, leave us a review wherever you like to listen. It really helps, and we love to hear your feedback. And don't forget, malpractice makes perfect.
Bye.
Bye-bye.